Welcome to the Paradise Paradox. My name's Kurt Robinson.
My name's Aaron Battle.
So this is part 2 of our special talking about me, my beautiful, amazing self, talking about my personal journey, my evolution philosophically and mentally, stepping through the process of discovering liberty and why liberty is good, why people can look out for each other and participate in free markets and voluntary interactions and help each other, and how important that is, and how Mexicans understand liberty fundamentally. There's something interesting about Latin American culture that people inherently understand that it's good to do things for yourself and be independent.
We cover politics, we cover government, the roles of government, and maybe they're not so needed.
Yep. And we talk a bit about Australian politics as well. Cool. So press like, press subscribe on YouTube, press subscribe on iTunes and Pocket Cast, press like on Facebook, and toss us a few bones at donate.theparadiseparadox.com. We appreciate your support.
Press like on YouTube, press like on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and Pocket Casts. Follow us on Twitter @BattleAZ, @TroubleBubble, and show your support at donate.theparadiseparadox.com.
Welcome to the Paradise Paradox. My name's Kurt Robinson.
And my name's Aaron Battle.
So we're just going to keep rolling. We're talking about exactly the same thing we were talking about a moment ago, or from last episode from your perspective. So I'm just explaining how I got to be how I am politically or apolitically, explaining how I'm now a libertarian anarchist or anarcho-capitalist or voluntarist. And so last time I was explaining how I sent a few letters to some government organizations to try to judge their legitimacy or ask them where they got their authority. And the Australian Taxation Office sent me back a whole bunch of garbage, which didn't explain anything, which didn't explain how their authority was legitimate. And so that definitely planted the seed of doubt in my mind. Well, if it hadn't already been planted, I think they watered it significantly. And that's around that time, again, I was started to pay attention to Ron Paul, and he started planting these ideas in my mind about economic liberty. And of course, I'd always valued personal liberty. The other thing I did, as an experiment continuing on with this law stuff, I wasn't content to just send a letter to a government department and try to find out what was going on that way. I was actually I wanted to experiment. I wanted to explore the concept practically. So what I did was I looked at an easy way I could accidentally get a fine from the government. So on the trams in Melbourne, if you don't have a ticket on you, then when the tram inspectors get on, and they hardly ever get on, but when they do, they'll stop you and ask you for your name and a few other details, and they'll confirm your identity. And later you'll receive a fine in the mail. At the time, it was about $180. But these days, it's about $210, which, again, I mean, there's a maxim of common law. Let the punishment match the crime. Let the punishment be proportional to the crime. So I don't know how it makes sense that you can skip on a $4 fare and then be charged $210. It didn't make any more, and it didn't make sense to me. And again, it seemed to be another contradiction, another injustice of the system. But also, it's a matter of special privilege, because if you're a private bus operator and somebody gets on your bus without a ticket, I mean, you can kick them off. That's your right. But you can't take them to court, especially not using taxpayer money to fund the prosecutors. That's ridiculous.
You'd probably just ask them to pay for their ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you leave them alone.
Yeah. And that was another example of government inefficiency. And I'm not entirely sure if they set it up this way deliberately. It might just be a matter of incompetence. But what happens in Melbourne when you get on the tram, you can't actually pay for a ticket on the tram anymore. Even if you have money with you and, you got it there in your hand and you're ready to give it to somebody, you can't. So what normally happens is a bunch of tourists get on the tram, they look to pay, realize they can't pay, and get fined $210. And this is the way the system works. It's ridiculous. Or you pay by a credit card, but the payment doesn't arrive on your public transport card until 48 hours later. So this is the whole ridiculous thing about. It's just a classic example of how governments organize things. They're not incentivized to organize things well. They're not incentivized to provide good customer service because it doesn't matter what happens to them from their perspective. They're going to get paid regardless. They're going to get paid on the taxpayer's dollar, and the taxpayer's dollar is extracted by force rather than money given willingly.
Yeah, I wonder if you could get a government to crowdfund their annual budget.
Yeah.
Would they'd be making staff cuts?
Yeah. Right? You bet they would. Yeah.
It's like, because if we on a voluntary basis were able to contribute to Liberal or Labor or the Greens or whatever have you,
the major parties in Australia. Yep.
I don't think people would willingly give them as much tax money as what we do. No. As like we're going to, but no, they're going to ask a question. What are you going to do with the money?
Exactly. Yeah. Suddenly, people become a lot more aware about what's happening when they have to make a decision where they're going to put their money.
That's pretty basic to crowdfunding. They try and advertise what they're going to do and timelines, and and they're aware that you're using other people's money to complete a project, and you're expected to deliver. With government, it's expected whatever happens.
Yeah, they'll tell you their expectation. I remember in the Hunter Valley, where we grew up, on the Hunter line, they had those red rattlers. You remember this? Like if you caught the train.
Well, I never really caught the train much, but I know the ones you're talking about.
All right. Well, I used to catch a train a lot, and they made this declaration, the government, they said, by 1996 or whatever year it was, we will have all of the red rattlers off the lines. And their solution was actually to paint them grey. These crappy old trains, they were no longer red rattlers. They painted them a different colour.
Do people know that?
It was obvious. This is a kind of government project, So many times if you look at government projects, they'll say, we'll be finished in 2012. 3 years later, then it actually happens. And that's not unusual in any government around the world.
I'm just trying to think of more of a public government example other than wanting to fund them yourself or asking what do you use the funds for. I'm coming up dry. Like the opportunity to, for example, we were talking about government because, government provides services for the public.
Yep.
But if the public were able to choose their own service and who they wanted to run that, which I suppose that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's like the ideal. That's what, when people actually believe in government, that's what they think is happening somehow.
So I know we touched on this briefly in episode 3. We talk about the economics of freedom.
Yep.
And, we mentioned that we are the government. That the government is just people.
Yeah, you said that. I didn't.
Okay. I said that we are the government.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that it's our neighbours and people in our community that get in their cars, and when we're driving to work, you guys, they're driving to their office, which is a government council building, and that's their job, right?
And in theory, everybody has voted these in, and it's all very legitimate and above board, and that's kind of the theory. We are the government because we voted them in. We chose who to do it, and government is the things we do together. But that's just some rhetoric. That's
usually
little relation on reality.
Yeah, it's a nice little game, isn't it? Because we're told to be part of it, we can choose to vote or not vote on A, B, or C.
Yeah.
Or D and E that never get in because there's not enough people.
Yeah.
And that's the extent of the gameplay. It's like, oh well, you know, I voted for B. A's now running the well, I guess the politics now. I guess I got to put up with him until the next 4 years. I guess I got to put up with whoever it is until I get to vote again, and maybe next time I might get my way.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing? That's what they do.
That's exactly what they do. Well, this is a graphic that comes up on Facebook sometimes, and it's like government. This is how democracy works. Like situation A, you get the guy who you wanted in. You get your candidate elected, and he forces other people to do what you want them to do. Or scenario B, someone else gets their candidate elected, and they force you what they want to do. Like those are pretty much your only two options, and that's in a ideal scenario. Like that's if the politicians actually do what you want them to, which is unlikely. Yeah,
I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been out of that for a while. It's been at least 6 months before I've even put an ear to the ground on what's happened in the Australian political system.
Yeah, well, you know, Tony Abbott's eating onions. Did you see that footage?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so Tony Abbott did a little PR thing, like a little photo op, went to some onion farm in Tasmania or Victoria, and he picks up an onion, skin and all, and just bites right into it, like as if he has no idea what an onion is or what it's used for. Maybe the guy has lived such a sheltered life he's never set foot in the kitchen. Some people would, suggest it might be accurate considering his level of passive misogyny. And some people say, he's an alien? Like, why is he doing this?
No,
is he so... Okay.
Don't do this to me.
Let's not go down. To bite into an onion, skin and all, like I could almost understand if it didn't have the skin on there. I would almost say, okay, well, some people like that kind of spicy.
Peel off the shell skin and
have a little bit. I have raw onion on a taco or a sandwich, and that's fine. But no, skin and all. Like, is this guy from another planet? He has no idea what people do on Earth, how people eat. He thinks we receive our nutrition intravenously, or what? What is in this guy's brain?
Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Well, the other option people brought up were like people were saying MK Ultra, like he's being controlled by the CIA.
Yeah. Or maybe he's an alien. But irrespective, it's the same thing. I mean, who bites an onion? I could. I mean, I don't mind onion, but I mean, I'd peel the hard shell off the outside first.
Yeah,
the crunchy
the
bits.
onion industry loved it. They said they were getting a lot of good press. Onions, the Onion Corporation or whatever. Yeah, they were like 2 thumbs up. We love him.
Cool. But what was his reaction? Did he eat it like just like an apple or a?
Oh well, he made this face like he like maybe it wasn't his favorite thing in the world, like the first time eating an oyster or something, and bite into it and. Like he was considering it, like it's a fine wine, and it's not sweet or exactly, it's a little tart. It's got some different kinds of flavors.
He was really analysing
different layers of it. Yeah, like interesting palate.
Well, do you think he did it by accident? As in, he was in in trance and just picked it up and bit into it.
I have no idea what goes through his mind. I mean, the classic video is also where he's not saying anything. Somebody asked him about a gaffe which he made, like this faux pas where he said to some soldiers, "Shit happens."
Shit happens.
Yeah, and from the context, maybe he was actually saying sometimes bad things happen when you're in the military. But the way it came off, or the way the media portrayed it, was he was like, tough shit. You're a soldier and you die.
Well, you know what? If he stuck to his story, with like, you know what? I was with the boys and I said shit happens. So what?
Yeah. But what he actually did was, for about 30 seconds or 2 minutes, he's just staring at the reporter. Yeah, it's like he has PTSD or something.
He just stalled.
It's like he's really messed up. Like he's got 1,000-yard stare and now has come back from battle and doesn't really, like, he just flips out and has some kind of weird flashback. I don't think he's actually ever been in the military.
I'm just recalling the footage.
Yeah,
it was like 30 seconds, right? Like or 20 seconons. It wasn't like
it could have been like 2 minutes.
It was a while.
It's a long time, and the reporter's there, like, you're not saying anything, Tony.
Yeah, I know.
He just keeps nodding, like he's about to explode or something. Who knows? He's definitely a bizarre character.
I just don't understand how that could happen. Like, I understand maybe 1 second or 2 seconds, like and then not saying that.
And then he says, "I've given you the response that you deserve." Like, this reporter was scum for somehow asking him to clarify what he meant.
Yeah, he should have just said, I said it. It happens. And it does.
Well, what came out last week was David Leyonhjelm, the Liberal Democrat senator in Australia. He came out and he compared the previous Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, to a dog. He said, well, every dog has a day. This was in some internet comment from like 3 years ago before he got elected. He was like, every dog has a day, and it looks like this mangy dog is about to finish hers. And it was really innocuous to say something like that. I mean, it wasn't like he was saying she's a dirty old dog, like she eats scraps from under the table, or she eats her own crap.
I find it a very Aussie way to talk.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's like what you hear Dad saying. It's like, that's kind of the Aussie way.
Exactly, and that's what he said in response to it. When the media hit him up about it, he was like, "I don't really remember saying that, but I guess maybe I did say that. I don't really give a fuck if I do." Those were literally his words.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. I think more politicians should be real.
Yeah.
Like, they don't need to pretend to be all formal and, perfect with every single response. It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm one of the people.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
He's like, well, that's how most Australians talk when they're at home, so what's the big deal? Yeah. So I think he's making a lot of waves. A lot of people criticize him and say, oh, well, he only got on because his party name is the Liberal Democrats, and people mistook him for a member of the Liberal Party, which is one of the main two parties. Sorry?
That's just marketing.
Yeah, I don't know if they did it deliberately, but whatever. I mean, a lot of people would have voted for him anyway. He probably would have got the seat anyway, but that's the criticism that keeps coming up. But with the way he's going, the way, like, he's such a straight shooter, I think the Liberal Democrats are going to get more and more support. But that's also, I think it's kind of just a political cycle, because a lot of political parties might start with some kind of principled grounding, some moral principles, some framework. They say, this is what we stand for. Like, the Liberal Party in Australia originally was more of a classical Liberal Party, but now they don't really care. They just suck on big business's dick. And the Labor Party was supposed to represent the unions. I guess that's still kind of true to some extent.
Yeah, I find Labor still kind of follows suit, but Liberal kind of lost their way.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party kisses big businesses' butt, and the Labor Party kisses the unions' butt, and that's how it kind of works out. Or I think what would happen if the Liberal Democrats, even though I like the party, I like David Leyonhjelm, I think if it progressed to a point where they're actually a major party, forget about it. They'll just get corrupted, and that's the cycle beginning all over. But I like that he's in there and talking about things.
How's the public accepting this new party?
Well, I think it's got a good response because Leyonhjelm can't help but make the papers because his position from a mainstream perspective is just so radical, and I guess in some ways it's hard for people to nail him down because the word libertarian still isn't such a common word in the Australian vernacular, or classical liberal. People don't know what those words mean. And so they call him a centrist or some kind of nonsense like that.
Well, that's a point we were discussing earlier. It's not like Australians naturally associate themselves to a party.
Yeah.
It's like not like in the US.
I think a lot of older people do, but I think that with younger people, they don't really click in so much with that. Except with I see a lot of people following the Greens, a lot of young people.
Yeah.
But I think the Greens are like watermelons. The green on the outside and red on the inside. They're all commies or socialists, yeah.
That's like a social system thing, right? Like we're gonna look after the people.
Socialism is the idea that the state owns the means of production, but the ideal behind it is that they're going to protect people and look after people. And yeah,
do they do that? Like, do they keep true to their?
Well, the Greens, I think the Greens actually tend to put the environment before people, so they support stuff like closing down the mines, and I can understand why they would want to close down mines and try to protect the environment, but the problem is we've got to worry about people as well. Are you going to just shut down people's livelihood? That's a big
destroy
thing.
Towns.
Yeah, just destroy towns. Send heaps of people broke. So it's like a policy where they haven't considered the entire economic consequences, and that tends to be basically what socialism relies on. I think it was Rothbard who said if socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists. Yeah,
that checks out.
Yeah,
that I think for a moment would go over someone's head, as in, okay, it's a funny call, but why is that exactly?
That's a whole deep thing. Okay,
it's important because I told you before I would have said okay, cool, but now it's like, of course, if they were inclined to be more money orientated or to grow the economy, then you'd be trimming that off. But at the same time, if you were more inclined to look after people, then it comes back to growing the economy anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the best way, there's a Hebrew or Jewish tradition to say the highest form of charity is to allow someone to be productive on their own, to support themselves. And I know that's a kind of sentiment within your family as well. And I remember my little brother Amos, he was kind of a strong socialist for a while, for a few years, and now he still has some socialist ideals, but he's not so far to the left. And I remember I was having a conversation with him, and he's like, "But why? Why do people need so much money? Why do they need to make so much money? I mean, they're happy. They could be just fine with just a little bit of money, and everything would be fine." And I was like, "Well, hold on. I mean, yeah, they don't need it. That doesn't mean they don't want it. I mean, are you trying to change human nature through a political system? I mean, if you want to change human nature, maybe there's some kind of way you can do it, like educating people, okay, but not through force, not through a political system. That's that's not going to work?
They're going to do it through food.
Through food?
Through food. Well, through GMOs, through high sugar diets.
All right, putting BVP in your drink bottles and whatever, and removing testosterone causing parts from your diet and generating more estrogen replacements.
That's what happened in England, right?
I don't know. I don't want to touch on that one. That requires a whole lot of research.
No, well, I mean, I knew England do recycle a lot of water, so their filtering system was not removing the hormones that's in the
okay.
What's it called?
In the water supply.
Yeah, I mean, with the water supplies, it gets filtered, but they're not pulling out like the hormones that are in, the medication that females take.
Yeah. Birth control, the pill.
Birth control, or any hormone related drug, they won't filter in.
Yeah.
So all that went straight through, and those men that were growing racks. To be professional.
Top rank material.
Watch us again at the Paradise Paradox. Watch us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter, and listen to us on iTunes or Pocket Casts.
Yeah, so I decided to go out and get that tram fine, or I got a couple actually. And
just went out and got it.
Yeah, because I was like, well, now that I say this is kind of illegitimate, because I'm like, how is this public transport system funded? Well, it's funded by tax money, and then they go on and they make the public transport system, and then they force us to pay for it. Like that doesn't make sense. And the maxim of law, which I thought applied, was natural equity or good faith do not allow us to demand twice payment of the same thing. I mean, if I'm a carpenter and I sell you a table and you pay me $200 and then I think, oh, maybe Aaron is such a bubblehead that I could get him to pay twice. I'm kidding, relax. And then I send you another letter saying, please, this is an invoice. Pay me $200 for that table. What do you call that?
I call that creative accounting.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of government employees would employ that Orwellian language. It's called fraud. Of course, it's called fraud. Yeah.
But I mean, that's like pay for it, then pay the rent that you weren't told about. It's double dipping. I mean, the whole tax system is set up like that.
Double dipping, yeah. And they even do things like when I worked in insurance, they would charge stamp duty and the fire service levy. Then they charge GST on top of that. I mean, it's really not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to tax taxes. That's really not supposed to happen.
Well, that's just the start.
Yeah.
I mean, you start wanting to retire, and that's a whole new area of taxes. I mean, Richard, the guy from Swiss Metal, sent me an article how Australia are looking at taxing deposits into bank accounts.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
It's like, are they running out of things to tax?
5 basis points, and but basically they're saying, it's just a tax on banks. Well, you know where banks get their money, right? They get it from their customers. They get it from their deposits. So they'd put on 5 basis points, like 0.05% as a deposit tax, and then basically it would come off your interest rate that you normally receive in a savings account. That's probably how they would structure it. And then, probably after 5 years, it would be up to 50 basis points, 0.5% or 1% or whatever.
Yeah, they have to be aware that the bank is only going to push these charges to the consumers.
Yeah, but people aren't. People don't connect that. That will, like, when you fine a corporation, people will call out and say, fine that corporation for polluting the river. Well, then you're not fining a corporation. A corporation isn't a person. A corporation is a legal entity.
Well, that's company tax as well.
Yeah, Yeah. So you're actually, I mean, you're finding maybe the employees, or you're finding the customers of that organization or the shareholders. You're not really finding the corporation. It's not like the CEO receives
It's not a thing.
something like a big bill in the mail. That's not how it goes.
Yeah, it just becomes another cost of doing business,
Yeah.
which gets spread over all products or services that are provided,
Yeah.
which is going to affect the bottom line or the price or the surcharge or whatever they're going to call it.
Yeah, so they don't really care. They put an extra 5-cent charge on their ice creams or whatever they're selling. Business as usual. Yeah, so the thing was, I started calling up when I received these fines in the mail from the Department of Transport. I started calling them up and I said, well, what is this? Like, what is it that you've sent me in the mail? I mean, I don't really understand. I sent them a couple of letters beforehand and saying, well, what authority do you have to send me this bill? And how do you know? I can see you've quoted the Transport Act of 19, whatever it was. And how do you know, or what evidence do you have that this act applies to me? And of course, they didn't answer that question. They actually, that was probably one of the more direct answers I got, because they told me something like, well, this act applies to all persons in the state of Victoria. And so I wrote them back saying, well, hang on. I mean, the state of Victoria is, I mean, it's a landmass, but it's also a legal entity, like a corporation. And what is a person? Because a person can be a corporation, a person can be an employee. There are many definitions of the word person. So can you define your terms? If you're going to tell me that it applies to all persons in the state of Victoria, I need to know what that means. And of course, they didn't answer that question. And I understand partly the reason they don't answer that question is because they don't want to say something that isn't approved by their legal department and then have it come back and bite them in the ass later, because somehow it could be construed as giving legal advice. Or if they tell me something erroneous, then they could be personally liable. There's a whole bunch of things like that. Not that holding bureaucrats liable is a very easy thing to do. But the thing was, I called up this guy, and the letter came, and it was like from B. Simpson, and I was like, is this guy having a laugh or what? What is going on here? But I called him up. His name was Brett Simpson.
That's funnier.
Yeah. So I said, Brett, what's the deal? Like, why are you sending me this letter? I don't get it. And he's like, look, you just have to pay it, or you go to court. I'm like, but why? I mean, I ask you these questions like, why am I liable? What proof do you have that this act applies to me? And he's like, why are you doing this, Kurt? Is it for the money? I'm like, no, that's not what it's about, Brett. Trying to see it from my perspective. I received this what appears to be a bill or an invoice in the mail from a company whose services, or an organization whose services I've never contracted, and you're requesting me this money. It doesn't actually say what this service was you provided to me, and you're claiming that I owe you this money. But then when I ask you to provide evidence to that claim, you're unable to provide any evidence. And he said, I'm not going to argue with this. I'm not going to argue with you about this. Look, just pay the fine or go to court. This conversation is over. And I was stunned. I just sat there in silence for like 20 seconds. And he's like, are you still there? I'm like, yeah. He said, oh, goodbye. Like, I think I think he surprised himself with his own anger. And probably the first time in his life that anybody ever asked him those questions. and he didn't know how to react, and then he was surprised that he acted in such an impolite manner. That's what a lot of people do when you ask them questions which challenge their worldview.
He might have been upset with himself for never considered your point of view.
Yeah, possibly. Well, yeah, I mean, he was more empathetic than most. I'll give him that. So then I ended up going to court, and there were a whole bunch of strange things about it. I mean, they tried to bamboozle me with a bunch of things, and they got me. They got me. I ended up getting the fines reduced, so that was one thing. It's kind of a partial win. So a site that I recommend if you want to go down this path. I'm not offering legal advice or anything, but if you want to do some research about this, an interesting site to look up is markstevens.net, markstevens.net, and his motto is creating a voluntary society, one visitor at a time. And he likes to call up bureaucrats and prosecutors and ask them for this type of thing. There's a funny one where he calls up someone in Dandenong, like just outside of Melbourne, and tries to get some evidence out of them. And it's obvious this prosecutor's like 80% bogan. So it's pretty funny. Anyway.
Worth checking out?
Yeah. I highly recommend the site for their entertainment value, especially the calls of shame. They did this stuff like in court. The prosecutor was there, and he was like this green kid straight out of law school. And I'd sent the prosecution a whole bunch of letters, and they never sent me any response. So when I got to court, I had this thick wad of papers, which was all the correspondence that I'd sent to them. The magistrate, on the first occasion, she kept asking me for my argument, and I was like, well, I'm not here to present an argument, I'm just here to present the facts, and these are the facts. This is the correspondence that I've had with the prosecution, and they haven't responded. And I had to repeat myself about 3 or 4 times before the magistrate eventually said, okay, I'll have a look. Basically, it seemed like she was avoiding. She didn't want to look at what the actual issues were because she knew it was going to open up a can of worms, or she had the feeling that it might open up a can of worms. But I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, I've been sending these letters to the prosecution for months, and they haven't responded. Then when I come to court, the magistrate gets there and she's like, I don't care. I don't care what you've been talking about to the prosecution. I'm like, if this happened today, I'll be like, hold on. I mean, this court is supposed to be to resolve the issue, right? And that's what I've been trying to do. So
I don't think you're the only one in this situation. Most people going to court just find the whole process expensive, time-consuming,
exactly.
and oftenly enough, not very productive.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another example of government failure. Nobody really wants to use the court system. People are looking at alternatives, other arbitration systems, like when people get divorced, they don't want to go through the court system and take 3 years and pay tens of thousands of dollars. Who really wants to do that? I mean, you get a private arbitrator, and you can pay like less than $1,000, and they'll help you sort out your divorce. Pretty amazing what you can do when you get the government out of the way. So even a few $100s, I think, some of these services.
Take your word on that.
Yeah.
I've still got plenty of government in my way.
Yeah. Well, that happens, got to wipe your shoes off every now and then. So that was the thing. And then the prosecutor was like, actually, I haven't seen that correspondence. Can I have a look at that first? I wish I'd pointed this out because on his desk or in his other hand were actually a bunch of letters, registered post envelopes with my handwriting on them. So if this happened, this was my first time ever in court, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But if it happened again, I probably would have pointed out how ridiculous he looked and how unprepared he was, how the prosecution hadn't even bothered to try to sort it out before coming to court. So they were basically wasting the court's time. And yeah, there were a whole lot of other things.
You know that stuff doesn't matter.
It matters to some extent because if I embarrass the prosecutor enough, like if I make the magistrate look like an idiot, then that's not going to work in my favor. But if I make the prosecution look like an idiot and completely incompetent, yes, that works in my favor. Because when it gets to a certain point, the magistrate isn't going to have much choice. She has to save face too, because this is a public court.
Yeah,
there are people around. Like, how is she going to run it through and fudge it if it's obvious that the prosecution has no idea what they're doing?
I wish I had more experience when I went to court.
Yeah, on some level, I'm like, oh, I'd like to try that out again because it's a buzz, it's adrenaline.
It's cool.
But on the other hand, I'm like, no, that's a whole lot of stress that I don't need. I prefer to, there's a whole bunch of other ways that I could be using my time.
So true.
There was a lot of weird things about that. I mean, the magistrate ended up saying, okay, this appears to be a constitutional argument. We're going to stand down the case for 6 months. And I was like, stand down? What does that mean? She's like, basically it means, I don't remember her exact words, but
I'm going to holidays.
yeah, it sounded like she was saying, I want to wash my hands of this. I don't want to see it. Let somebody else deal with it in 6 months. But what happened was the prosecutor, not the green kid, but the chief prosecutor, kind of bamboozled me and ran some sales game on me to convince me to go to trial about 6 weeks after that, which I don't really understand how he can even do that. Like, he just goes over the magistrate's head. But this is, just another example of how much of a shambles the Australian court system is. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, but in the hearing, I ended up getting my fines reduced, and it was basically a train wreck. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was trying to cross-examine the witnesses, and the prosecutor was objecting to every second thing I said. So that was an interesting experience. But the point about that was, it's, as I said, with the letters with the ATO and all this nonsense, it started to click to me like these people don't give any straight answers. They don't tell you what authority they have, and if I don't have any evidence of that authority, I mean, what you can assert without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So a few months later, I saw some videos from Stefan Molyneux, and one famous one is the story of your enslavement. And this talks about how people are treated like cattle, like livestock, or he compares them to kind of free-range cattle, free-range slaves. And that's how people are treated through taxation. The fruits of your labor is just, they skim a little bit off the top. And Molyneux makes the case that government is unnecessary, and it's actually immoral. It's not just like, I was seeing it from a perspective of a law, of common law, and I would say government is unlawful, that most of their actions are unlawful. But he further made the case that government is immoral, that government steals things and performs theft and murder and all these types of nasty atrocities. This neologism is democide. Democide means when a government kills its own people. And even if you exclude the Holocaust and a few other things from the 20th century, governments killed hundreds of millions of their own people. It's a serious cause of death. It's serious. It's really serious. Deadly serious. Governments kill people every day. people in Mexico, that's one of the reasons I like living here. I'm sure I've said it many times. People in Mexico know this. People in Mexico know that governments kill people, and they don't accept government as legitimate for the most part. If I tell a Mexican that taxation is theft, they will say yes. Of course it is, that requires no further explanation. If I say that to an Australian, I have to get into a whole long-winded debate trying to analyze, explain what theft is and how taxation and theft are more overlapping than you think, draw a few diagrams, spend about 3 hours discussing it with them for them to just say, look, let's just agree to disagree.
Press like on YouTube. Press like on Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and Pocket Casts. Follow us on Twitter @BattleAZ and Trouble Bubble, and show your support at donate.theparadiseparadox.com.
That's what I like living in Mexico, when I start to try to explain my political or apolitical beliefs, how I don't think government is a legitimate institution. People are wide open to the idea, because that's one thing in one definition of government is a monopoly on violence in a geographic area that has the appearance of legitimacy. And in Mexico, in a lot of Latin America, I don't think there is an appearance of legitimacy, or at least it's very thin veneer of legitimacy.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. I don't think people they know exactly what's going on, so they can't be brainwashed anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. I'm not sure whether it's from a history of listening to your parents, whinge and complain about the situation, or just all through Mexican history, and I mean Latin American as well.
Yep.
It's just evident that the government's not there to help you.
Yeah, I guess it goes back a long way. I wonder what it's like to grow up in the Mexican school system, which I probably should ask some of my friends some more detailed questions about, because I have to wonder, there must be something subtle in the Australian school system which says to people, this is the correct way. It's some kind of meta-communication, because the teacher is at the front. You do what the teacher says. That's normal. That's the way it should be. This authoritarian model, where that's not really how things work in the real world, except when government gets involved, where a small group of people are telling you what to do. And
I think it's almost having the concept of having a high school captain and the prefects as well. I mean, we had that in primary school as well.
Yep.
And as a kid, it seems like a silly little game you're playing at the time, and you stand up and ask questions to this panel of captain and prefects. But I think that's where the seed comes in.
Yeah, where they try to get you to form your own government.
Where you're controlling yourself.
Yeah. They're getting you to be complicit with the system. We elect certain members among the population. It's like something out of... I'm about to break Godwin's law here, but it's not like something out of Nazi Germany. Like in Schindler's List, you'll see there'll be one of the kids is selected as a guard. One of the Jewish kids he's like, I'll volunteer to be one of Hitler's guards, and he's a Jew, but at the same time he's one of the Nazis, and he's actually controlling the Jews, and because of that, I guess it makes them more complicit.
I see that same example in Swing Kids.
Yeah.
And the whole swing movement being like the voice against the suppression of government, political parties.
Yep.
But in that, one of the guys from the group as well is selected to join the Nazi army, and then he comes back and he's beaten on his own friends. And they look at him like, what are you doing?
Okay, I might check that out. Yeah. So, yeah, this was my long road in philosophical development where I started believing to some extent in personal liberty, but I never understood how far it went. Then with listening to Ron Paul, I started to understand economic liberty. Like I understood that government wasn't actually keeping us safe. It wasn't keeping the water clean or keeping the food safe to eat or anything like that. It actually had very little to do with the government. It's people's own incentives. And like as Adam Smith said, it's not by the benevolence of the butcher or the baker that you can go to their shop and buy something from them. It's from their own self-interest. And self-interest, well, it gets made out to be a bad guy, and I guess sometimes it can. There has to be a few things which go along with it, like people have to have a long-term view, and they have to be respectful and compassionate on some level. But they have to have some level of wisdom, some basic level of wisdom to see that violence isn't a sustainable way to run a business. But self-interest is good. Self-interest is really good. It's good to do things for yourself. And when you do things for yourself, you can also do things for other people. That's something about Confucius. Confucius said you should... Well, that sounds really weird to say. Confucius says... No, it's not a joke. Confucius actually said this. Confucius said it's in your interest to pursue your passion. And somebody looked back at that and said, how can Confucius say this when the idea of Confucianism is supposed to be about looking out for those around you, being compassionate and helping people? And the way that this paradox is resolved is because pursuing your own self-interest is good. Pursuing your own passion is good. And it absolutely does lead to benefits for other people, just like with the butcher and the baker. And just like with Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, they pursue their own interests and they actually make Earth and humanity better through technology, through improvements. By pursuing their own interests, they actually give something to the world. And that's something really amazing.
The gift.
Yeah. So through understanding personal liberty, economic liberty, and understanding how law shall apply equally to everybody, and then when I finally got that piece about how government is immoral, it all clicked into place for me, and I realized that government is illegitimate and unnecessary and unlawful. We just don't need it. We can look out for each other. Yeah.
You got it.
Cool.
I got nothing to add to that.
Great. All right. So my name's Kurt Robinson.
My name's Aaron Battle.
Yep. Press like on YouTube, press subscribe on YouTube, press like on Facebook, press get notifications so you remember to see notifications from us, seeing what good stuff we're up to. Subscribe on iTunes and on Pocket Casts, and lend us a hand if you like the episode. Give us $1 on donate.theparadiseparadox.com. We accept in donations by Bitcoin and altcoins. All right, peace.
like on YouTube. Press like on Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and Pocket Casts. Follow us on Twitter @BattleAZ, @TroubleBubble, and show your support at donate.theparadiseparadox.com.